Hi everyone. Today I'm talking about. I'm happy to get here to talk about the important topic of the relationship between China and the U.S. As you know, the global situation has become more difficult since the South China Sea arbitration. It may have many supporters who argue that China's race as an economic and military power, coupled with its aggression in the South China Sea, have led some to call for a major rebalance of U.S. policy and strategy. On the other hand, there's also voice that each of us should realize China has become the world's second largest economy, and the rival relationship between the U.S. and China is not what we would expect. For example, the economic and also the East Asian problems like Tibet, Xinjiang, and Taiwan, even the North Korea. Judging by recent public commentary from a number of American foreign policy, they stand on the side of the rival relationship with China. There are three issues. The first is, can China be trusted to act as a responsible global stakeholder? Second is, does the policies pursued by a president begin with Nixon outdated? And third is, the China political system is stand by the opposite side with the U.S. Will it become a long-term ally? The editorial took a clear and firm stance on this topic. On the other hand, the author of the article also gives us the opinion that U.S. should not get into rival relationship with China for the South China Sea arbitration. I wish to argue against the advice of those who seek to define the relationship with China as one of the unchecked rivalry for several reasons. The first one is U.S. should not get into the rival relationship with China for the South China Sea arbitration. China can be trusted to act as a responsible global stakeholder because it has been the fastest growing market for U.S. export of goods and services for over a decade. It is in the vital interest of both countries to work together and collaborate on shared interests like on nuclear countermeasures, climate change, and trade. The second one is the policies pursued by a president beginning with Nixon outdated. The existing policy continues to work. The rationale is that on the basis of the policies, the East Asia could become the world's most stable, ordinary, economically dynamic region. This would also contribute to U.S. as the world economic is tied together. The third one is China has no military aliens, unlike the United States with its largest network of global allies. It has no overseas bases. Its host has a fundamental principle of international relationship, respect for state sovereignty. As you can see, this is a very complicated situation. While the South China Sea arbitration influenced the relationship between China and the U.S., the evidence indicated that the U.S. should not get into rival relationship with China. The smart strategy would be avoid conflict and promote cooperation. Thank you.
All right, so we know that the subject is U.S.-China relations and whether or not a rivalry situation is appropriate given something that's been decided by the South China Sea arbitration. I think you need to give us a little bit more explanation of what happened. What is this thing that is being referred to? I know that there are some conflicts over the territories in the South China area, that there might have been some economic or military discussions between countries in this area, but I don't have any of the details, and you need to give us a little bit more context as to what it is that's going on in these circumstances that might cause foreign policy people in the U.S. to suggest that we have a different relationship. So we don't have enough context that's going on here. You gave us a little bit of explanation about why China is important and why there might be problems with doing this, but you don't really say what your proposition is. At the end, there's an argument about what your proposition is, and there it sounds like it's a policy proposition. I think your argument ultimately is that developing a rival relationship would have harmful consequences to the world, or at least harmful consequences to the United States, should we have that situation. That's probably the best way to summarize what the argument is, but it needs to be stated a little bit more clearly. There is a preview of what the supporting structure is going to be, because you do tell us what the issues are that you're going to talk about. But it wasn't clear to me when you were presenting this that this was your argument. It sounded like you were summarizing the argument that was presented in this article that you read. And that is a little bit confusing, because you're the one who's supposed to be taking a position on this. I don't just want to hear somebody else's argument on this issue. I want to hear what you think about this particular point. And from the way you presented it, it sounded, like I said, like it's more of a paraphrase or a summary of the position that's being taken. But you don't even cite that article. I just heard a reference to the article without having a source citation on it, and I think that's problematic. The secondary points are labeled clearly while you're speaking, so I was able to follow those points. But on the information on most of that, you don't really provide any sources on that. For example, on the first point, you talk about we have shared interests, and they mention climate change and nuclear aspirations of Korea and that sort of thing. And that's just general information. There's nothing specific. As far as I know, we don't have a treaty that we've signed with China in regard to those issues. Maybe they're part of the process of trying to negotiate with North Korea about nuclear weapons, but you should cite that agreement. There's nothing here about, so we've got climate change. We've got that in common with everybody on the planet. If climate change is in fact a significant issue, then all countries on the planet are part of that process. So why would that mean that China has to be different in some way, shape, or form? I don't know. So that argument needs a lot more development there. You suggest that the policies of the preceding presidents have been working, and the best proof that you have on that is that China has become an important marketplace for the U.S. That's definitely true. I think it's easy to document that we have a substantial amount of trade with China, and that both countries are benefiting economically from that, but I do think that your data on this could be a lot more specific. It's just very generic, and again, it's one of those things that makes it sound like there's something from the article that you are simply depending on to give us the information instead of your supplying that information. And then the third point, talking about China, it's not really likely to present an aggressive stance toward us or become problematic in this way. That's simply based on the fact that the Chinese don't have any natural alliances, which would suggest that we're the ones who are definitely the danger figure here, because we have so many other alliances, so that we're the ones who are the hair trigger. I think if the South China arbitration issue concerned territoriality issues, it concerned Taiwan and the other places that you mentioned, if it concerns security issues, and China's the one who's been pressing on those, that seems to run contrary to the position that you're talking about here. The fact that China doesn't have any natural allies doesn't necessarily suggest that they wouldn't respond with aggressive military action in some of these places to resolve those points. So I think that's a little bit problematic. Delivery issues, I know that you probably are not a native speaker of English, and so one of the things that you probably want to do is slow down a little bit. And because you're reading so much, it sounds less like you were talking to us. And you want to talk to your audience a lot more and explain these concepts. And like I said, because so much of it sounds like you're summarizing what somebody else's argument is, it would be much better if you were telling us what your position on this was, just looking at us and saying, this is a bad idea. What we have has been working really well. We don't really have to worry about the Chinese going off on us militarily. That's not something that's going to happen. And let me show you why those things are true. That's the way the argument ought to be presented. And it just feels a little stifled because of all of the reading that you're doing. All right, thank you for starting.